Hi YouTube, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2026. My name is Lisa and welcome to my channel. I talk about books, what's going on in my life in general sometimes, fountain pens, stationery, all those kind of things. Today's video is going to be my top 10 2025 reads from last year. I got through 68 books last year. My goal was 60, so I achieved that, which I was very happy about. But I'm going to go through my top 10 in no particular order until I get to the top three. And I'll kind of try to put them in some kind of order. So bear with me because it's been a while. I read these books quite some time ago and I'm still like reading stuff as we go forward that is carried over from 2025. All right, so the first book I want to talk about, and I'll put little pegs over here, was Red Rising Saga, which is one of my top three, actually. So let's not start with that one. Didn't realize I put that at 10. All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby was one of my top 10 reads. It focuses on a serial killer in small town in Virginia, and their first sheriff is a man of color. He's African American, and he has to solve this small town mystery. And the way that S.A. Cosby writes, I'm a fan of him already. I think I'll be continuing to read some more of his books. I've got them queued up for 2026. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about these books because I did talk about them through previous videos all of last year, so I can leave links above if you're interested. The Personal Librarian by Maria Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray is an historical fiction book that basically talked about, and this is based off of a real life person who was the personal librarian for, oh gosh, don't kill me. He is, I want to say it's Chase Morgan, like that empire of finance. Okay, so let's start over. The Personal Librarian was one of my favorite books of last year. I'm looking over to the side because I got to remember the notes here. Bella DaCosta Green was hired by J.P. Morgan. I knew it was one of those finance people. And she was his personal librarian, but she was really mixed race. Well, actually, she was African American, but she could pass for Caucasian, and so she came up with the story that her family was from Portugal, and so she got hired in as the personal librarian to JP Morgan, and their relationship and all the things that she kind of went through to disown her African Cuban roots to basically fit into society, and a little bit of love tension between her and JP Morgan because that also bubbled up in the book. Real life story. It was really interesting because J.P. Morgan's family, his kids, were very interesting lot as well. His daughter was a lesbian, and she was hiding that from him. Bella DaCosta was really Afro-Cuban, and she was hiding that from him. And there's a lot of those tensions and strings that happened in that book. So that was a very good read. I think I gave that book like a 4 or 4.25. Next on my list, I have, If the Cats Disappeared from the World. And as you can tell, I actually annotated it. This book, I think, for 2025 to me is the hidden gem because it's so sublime. And some of the messaging in this book just was really, really touching. It's about a Japanese postal worker who all of a sudden finds out that he has a terminal illness and he has a limited time. And he has a cat as well that he has a relationship with. He tries to reconnect with his old love interest from like days gone by, like basically through high school. But this is a very touching story about relationships. What do you do when you realize that your time is up sooner than you expect? Lots of like little tips of like insights of like life and life philosophy. Highly recommend this book. All right. Another book on my top 10 list was Educated by Tara Westover. This book is based off of a real life person as well. Tara Westover was raised in kind of the backcountry of Idaho to a family that did not really believe in girls getting educated for sure. There's a touch of Mormonism, a Mormon church stuff in here, but it's really not a ding on the Mormon church. It's just basically her feeling of how she was raised and wanting to get an education and pursuing it for her own self. So she ended up becoming self taught and how she went on to become a Rhodes Scholar at Cambridge, at Cambridge. This book, again, I felt was a hidden gem and a real life kind of semi autobiography book with a memoir, basically, is what this one was. So, this book I highly recommend. Um, Also on my list that I don't have is Demon Copperhead. And these books are so good that I really did struggle with like ranking them. So that's why some of these are kind of jumbled up. But Demon Copperhead, I'll put it over here, was one of my favorite reads. I didn't think after reading The Listeners that I wanted to read more about Appalachia and West Virginia, but I guess I was in the mood for it because that book was so good. The story takes off about Demon Copperhead and basically how his mother basically dies of an overdose and his abusive stepfather and how he kind of steps away from that and how he gets kind of shuffled through the foster care system in this county that he was living in West Virginia, where he finally lands with like the coach of the football team, where he feels like he finally garners some sense of purpose and belonging, only to have that kind of torn away, and his own struggles with drug addiction. You end up rooting for this guy the whole entire way. Very good story, very compelling. Highly recommend. Okay, next up I have. Ooh, okay, it's getting down to the knit and grit. I'm gonna go ahead and say this was one of my top three books, but it's the series. And I just finished Lightbringer. I'm going to go ahead and throw this in here. This is a sci-fi fantasy saga. Epic in scale, but this book is the leaping off point in which you have to like start the series to see if you want to be fully engaged in the other five books in the series. This series took me through it took me through all of 2026 because the books get to be thicker and chunkier. This is just the start. Lightbringer was 704 pages. I did not make it through in December. I was hoping to, excuse me, finish this in December. I was unable to. I just finished it a few days ago, like January 1st. So this whole entire series is fantastic, but you got to start with one. And if you're going to start with one that's going to get you sucked in, Red Rising. Absolutely wonderfully written, very engaging fight scenes, struggle. You follow in the first book Darrow as he loses his very young wife, and that basically gets him into dealing with a series of class group of people called the Golds, which are like upper echelons. There's a color caste system going on in this society, immense world building because the worlds are spaced as in our modern solar system. So certain things are happening on different planets. Certain golds overrule certain areas of the galaxy as it stands. It's just very riveting. There's a lot of character development with Daryl. You see him kind of morph through this first series, and it kind of sets up all the groundwork for the future books. Highly recommend. Actually, would be like on the upper part of my list. Next up, I have Atmosphere by why am I forgetting her name? Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't know why I forgot it. I read that. That was the only book I read in December. That's the only thing I was able to get through because I was reading Lightbringer and The Strength of the Few by James Islington. Both very chunky, dense books. If you read these fantasy series, you'll understand. But I was able to get through Atmosphere because that was a library book that I got through Libby. So that was one of my top favorite books of the year. It basically talks about a woman in two different timelines. You've got like the past as women are getting accepted into the NASA space program. And then you move forward to like a kind of modern day ish kind of early 2000s when women are blasting off in space and being part of the crew. There's some dynamic relationships happening between two of the key women in the book, which I'm actually. Okay, so the two female characters that you're going to be dealing with in this book, and there's some secondary characters that are, I wouldn't say key, but they are kind of key to the story, but it's really focusing in on Joan. And Joan Godwin is a professor at Rice University, and she applies to the NASA program. Unfortunately, during this time, which I think is the 90s, men are still very condescending. It's a very male world in NASA. Science in general is still a very male world. But she basically gets into the NASA program, and upon getting into the NASA program, ends up becoming, in this storyline, the first woman that gets to fly into space. Fast forward into the future, there's another key woman by the name of Vanessa Ford, who also was in the program. There's tension between the two of them as the relationship deepens. All the people that are their colleagues are absolutely brilliant in the fields that they have, but it basically explores their relationship and issues that are going on with NASA and flights. And it is, I thought, a very gripping story. I basically blew through that book in 3 days because I thought it was that good. Highly recommend. One of my top 10 books for 2025. Okay, so getting into the last few books of the year, and I should have done this in more of an order, I'm sorry. Okay, so the last three books that I have, and these were my top 3 books for 2023, and in no particular order because they were all very solid, as all the rest of them were, is Recitativa by Toni Morrison. I got that through the library in Libby. Toni Morrison, I don't know how she was able to do this, but she pulls it off very well. It's a story of 2 women. One's African American, the other is Caucasian, and you never know who's who in the story. And it does their lives in parallel. There's some overlap in their lives when they met, how they met, and how they continue to know each other through time. And it starts them off at a very early age when they're at a camp, and then it moves forward into their adulthood. And while you're reading this story, you will try to figure out which voice is the black voice and which is the female voice. Gripping story, and it does actually kind of tug at you and maybe some of the bias that you might have when it comes to who you think you know based off of race versus what you don't know. And it's mostly what you don't know. Toni Morrison beautifully played that book off. Highly recommend that book. One of my top 3, and got a 5-star rating for me in 2025. Okay, so that brings me to a tearjerker of 2025, and that is Tuesday with Maury. Kalia D reviewed this book last year in her YouTube channel, and it made me want to read it for last year as well, or maybe the year before she did it. It made me want to read it as well. This is a tearjerker. Again, I annotated. I don't normally annotate books, but I find that when I've got stuff that gives you little life tidbits and insight, philosophical things for you to think about, this book was loaded with it, but it also made me cry a lot. So this was the book that really kind of brought tears to my eyes when I was reading this book. Maury was a wonderful life teacher, and I highly recommend this book to anyone who wants to kind of think about life in general and maybe how you're living it. Highly recommend this book, Tuesday with Maury, 5-star read. Okay, and last but not least, for 2025, one of my top, oops, that's not the right, top other favorite read is Andy Weir, Project Hail Mary. Another sci-fi fantasy story, absolutely gripping. This was quite the page turner. I highly enjoyed it. Basically, our sun is giving off very dangerous, I want to say like solar peaks towards Earth, and basically is going to basically take us out. And so there is a school teacher who's teaching kids in, I think, middle school on this. Let's just say Ryland Grace. And he ends up basically he's a physics teacher, and so he gets adopted into like a NASA-like program, but on a global scale because the world is trying to prevent this catastrophe from hitting Earth, and our time is ticking. And it basically is an exploration of him kind of going through the program, getting co-opted and forced because some of the people who were supposed to do it are no longer able to do it, and he's the only person that they can put up into space. And this talks about his trials and tribulations of going through space, encountering extraterrestrial being, and probably making the first contact on that, and just what happens after that. Highly engaging read. Highly recommend that you pick this book up. If you like sci-fi fantasy and an adventure sci-fi fantasy, this one I think you'll be very happy with. So those are the top books that I read for 2025. For 2026, for the month of January, getting ahead of myself, I've got these books picked out for the January read. I will do a separate video for them and talk about whether or not how far I get into them, because I'm still reading Strength of the Few by James Islington at this point. So I'm hoping to wrap that one up, and then I'll put up another video for the reads that I have for January 2026. Sorry for the bumbling and fumbling. If you stuck with me to the end, thank you so much. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for hanging with me for all this time. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, take care. Bye.